All right. I was wondering how I was going to shape what I could bring to this panel discussion. So I just thought about things that I do. I'm 27 years old, so I might be in some of the, maybe an awkward age for some of this youth discussion and also early stage of my career, but I'll tell you what I do and what works for me and what hasn't worked for me. And I also put GIFs in my presentation for the first time, which is why that hair changes colors. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about why I care, what a millennial is, or what sort of I understand about millennials, traditional methods of research, also from my perspective, storytelling, and what I think might happen in the future. So, especially over the course of today, and I used this slide when I was in Nigeria last week, so people who were around last night at the networking event would have heard me talk a bit about that. And the reason why I use some of the words in the box in the middle to describe my experience with my grandpa is because I tried to think about commonalities between what they might notice in people in their communities and what I noticed that was a marked change in behavior with my grandpa. That's why. But I'm definitely rethinking some of those words today in this context. I also wanted to mention that out of two conversations I had today, one I was just having with Alice and Sean, I don't know if they're still here, is that I do think personality, from what I've observed, is consistent. And my grandpa was never really a friendly guy with me when I was growing up, and actually a positive thing from our relationship. I would go visit him a lot with my mom on my own. I would take care of him if my grandma could have a break sometimes, because I didn't mind. Probably somewhat because I'm a social worker. And he became much more affectionate with me, and he would give me like big long hugs, and he would pat my bum and stuff like that, and he would talk to me, and he never used to do that when I was a kid, so that's a nice thing. Okay, so I want to talk a little about generational differences. Who here, if they don't mind, is a millennial, so born between 1980 and 2000? Okay, so this is some of the stuff that's out there about millennials. So when I Google this, I look it up, and I'm like, I don't know. But I'm actually observing it, too, when I talk to some people, especially younger than me, and they want career advice from me, which I find strange in itself, but they want to get to the top right away. I want to have that top-level policy job. And my thought is always, why? Do you know how much responsibility that is? But, okay, tell me more about why you think you're qualified or something like that. So that's some of the negatives, is that some people see us as entitled or expecting the world right away at our feet. But a lot of the positives that I notice with people from this generation is that they want to work together, they think on a global scale, they are collaborative, and they are idealistic. Okay, Generation Z. So that is supposed to be 2000 to 2015, roughly. These aren't perfectly researcher evidence age brackets, just so you know. There's lots of differentials between generational categories. Accelerated academics is a big one. The way that we learn and are educated is going to change significantly in the future. Another thing that I've noticed from media, the internet, the way that data is collected and aggregated and handled, is recommended for you is everywhere. Personalize everything because of your browsing habits, because of your shopping habits, the different ways that information's collected. So I'm interested to seeing what that's going to look like in a few years too. Because sometimes the recommended for you are right for me sometimes, and I'm very surprised at that. Okay, so traditional methods. I work in an academics and research department at a hospital, so I see a lot of this. Publication in academic journals, conference presentations, clinical and practice tools. There is a place for these things, 100%. And I'm very mindful that I don't think we should be polarizing generations, but figuring out how to bridge the gaps between the work that we've done, because the work that's done before us is really important. So we don't want to leave that behind. More recently, and someone, I think it was Nihal, mentioned this before, open online courses, open access journals, open sourcing. I think my generation has a harder time paying for academic journals, or we don't understand why information is so expensive at that level. At least that's what I remember from my studies. And workshops, lots of workshops I've seen focused on KT, knowledge translation, specific pots of funding on knowledge translation, so getting the research to an audience instead of the implosion that at least I've seen sometimes with journal papers, especially if research terms, there's just so many ways to not find information with the databases that we have now. So these are two ways that I've noticed that kind of tie together some academic and research pieces. Academia EU and ResearchGate. I don't know if researchers here have these. Anybody can sign up for these. You can make up an affiliation if you want. That's a good and a bad thing, depending how you want to look at it. But if you want to see what's being published, you can belong to these. And if you want access to a text, you can email an author and say, hey, I really like your paper. I want to read more. I've read the abstract. They might answer you and say, too bad, or they might answer you and attach the full text. It's up to them, and who knows what sort of affiliations they have. But it opens a communication platform. I know this slide's busy, and I only have 8 minutes, which is why it's probably busy. At the top, it's just a breakdown of massive online open courses, which, as I said before, I think it's going to change the way that we learn. You can have a structured course, many different kinds, many different countries, that teaches you relatively similar information that you might find in an accredited university. One of the things that we've seen just in this generation because of the internet, and millennials are one of the first generations, I think they are the first generation that socialized with the internet, so we've never seen this before, is the University of the People. And so you can see there, it's the world's first nonprofit, tuition-free, accredited, online American university. People from all over the world take courses from this, and they're accredited courses. So the information is good, and it's free. Also, webinars. So this is a way that, again, people across the country, across the world, can participate in the same information. And Brain Exchange with the Alzheimer's Society has been doing a fantastic job. Who has heard of Brain Exchange? The ASO, okay. So a decent number of people, almost half people. That's pretty good. I also wanted to mention that there are good things for traditional research as well. So the way that research is practiced, and there are so many barriers when it comes to ethics. Ethical clearance is incredibly difficult, and it's very hard when it comes to recruitment, especially with a vulnerable population, which many people living with dementia would be considered as. One thing that I've observed, which has worked really well, Adam Smith, so he's my colleague or my friend, he works with joint dementia research. And that's something that anybody can participate in because they're looking at a lifetime of factors. So anybody, any age can join this database. And basically, if there's a study that comes up that you could be eligible for, based on the criteria that you've input in your membership profile, they can send you targeted studies. Okay, 2 minutes. All right, I also wanted to briefly mention, so there are lots of research organizations, granting, government, private sector, that put stuff out on the internet, that put stuff out on Twitter. So that's a good way to just share opportunities. And Lisa already talked about two of the, I think, newer ways of research going forward, community-based research and participatory action-based research. Project work. So I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to try and whip through these two. I wanted to include this because it's a lot about relationships and communication, which I think is kind of the key to life. It's relationships and communication, right? That's what makes sense from day one to the end. These are some of the platforms that I've worked with, which I keep learning. I just tell myself, I can learn this too. I can learn this too. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to post something 100 times, which I've done before. It's embarrassing, but then you just go through and delete it. Google Drive, WhatsApp, Trello, Slack, Skype, Dropbox. These are all platforms where you can upload files, share files, you can edit files. I'm not suggesting that you use this for research, especially if there's confidentiality implicated in this, but in project designing, in planning, and communication, these can be helpful tools. Okay, there's been a decent amount said about social media, so I won't talk about it too much. Just, I've noticed for myself too that generations now are very much skimmers. We want snippets of information and sound bites. The 140 characters in Twitter is intended to be conversational. So you would say, like, really happy, so-and-so mentioned this in their talk, hashtag happy, something like that. And then if you click on the hashtag happy, you open up a whole bunch of other people who hashtagged happy. This can also work when you think about variables in research, right? So for the database I was talking about before, okay, please stop. Okay, so if you were to say, I am a 20-year-old person, and you're a researcher and you're looking to recruit 20-year-old people, you would click on the research database version of a hashtag for 20-year-old and then send a targeted ask to those people who'd already consented to prospective research. Storytelling and promotion, I think we've gotten that. Stories are good. We've had a lot of awesome stories today. Oh, I do want to say active versus passive use of social media, which is something I've also been challenged with and have started doing more. I used to passively interact with social media, and now I'm more active about it, which doesn't mean I'm better at it. It just means that I put stuff more out, I resonate with things more, and I will express my opinion more. And I just read a study the other day that suggested that it's passive social media use that is more negative for somebody's self-image than active. Okay, also money. We don't always have to look at traditional ways of getting money. Academic grants, corporate grants. GoFundMe is one way that you can get money. So is crowdfunding and angel investors. Because I don't have any more time, I'm happy to talk about these on an individual basis with other people if you want. But these are mostly internet-based things, which is why they're newer. We haven't seen them before. Okay, so this is what I think will happen with the future. I think we'll get better at sharing information. We'll hold on to intellectual property less. I think that we're going to work better together and maybe find common denominators in what we want to do, which I hope will increase collaboration in our projects. Figure out how to celebrate each other more, because there should be less competition with prolific messaging. There's so much out there that we can just resonate and move forward, resonate, move forward. And that's what I have to say, my experience.